We are continuing our story, the kingdom story, as we go through the book of Matthew, as Jesus tells all these parables, the kingdom of heaven is like. We come today, we were in 18 last week, and today we go all the way to Matthew 20, right at the very top. And we're going to work our way through it today. It's about 6:45 in the morning. The owner of a vineyard is headed down to the marketplace, where there's people who gather around ready to receive their work for the day. And when he gets down, 6:45 in the morning, it's nice and early, he finds a group of people there that are ready to work, and he agrees to pay each of them a denarius for the day's labor. That's a good price for a day's work. And so they hop on board and they head off towards the vineyard. At about 8:45, the owner of the vineyard drives back down to the marketplace, the city square, and he sees more people working, or looking for work, and he looks and he says, why are you here? Why? No one's hired us yet. He said, you go into my vineyard and work, and whatever's right, I'll pay you. And they went off towards the vineyard. At about 11:45, the guy's back down in the marketplace, and I don't know why he doesn't just hire everyone he needed to work at 7. It doesn't seem like it's the best business practice to spread out hiring your labor for the day. But maybe there's a storm coming up on the iPhone telling him there's a storm on the horizon. Maybe the crops were a little fuller than he thought, needed more laborers. Maybe it's a really good price for crops this week, so he wants to pick as much as he can, as quick as he can. But for whatever reason, he's back. And he hires more at 11:45. And then also at 3 o'clock. And then also at 5 o'clock. He's back at the marketplace and he says, why aren't you working? And no one's hired us yet. I'll hire you. Go work in my vineyard too. There's only an hour's left of labor, but whatever is right is what I'll pay you. They couldn't believe it. They turned down, they looked at their iPhone, their watch, and they went, this guy's going to pay us for a full day for an hour? All right. So they run off the vineyard, excited. They work 1 hour, some 11 hours, and others in between. And as evening approaches at the end of the workday, the owner gathers up all of the workers in a circle, and he asks his financial steward to come out, and he picked little pocketbooks, what I imagine. He opens up and he shakes the little coins in there with the denarii to pay them all. And for some, let's call it stupid reason, really, he decides to pay the people who came at 5 o'clock first, and then work backwards through the day. And when each of those that came in at 5 in the afternoon gathered around and only worked for 1 hour, when they got one whole denarius, they were ecstatic. They were so excited. Could you imagine receiving a full day's labor for punching in and out for 1 hour? Wouldn't that be the greatest? You put on your schmuck, you go and you punch your card, and you do work for an hour and you punch it, and then they give you full day's wages? That'd be pretty sweet. Let me tell you about those that came at 9 in the morning. They were really, really happy to see the first people get paid a denarius. What's he going to pay for the 11 hours I worked? And those that came at noon, they're all happier. They can't believe this moment. Until the financial steward gathers up everyone who came at 3, and he hands each of them a denarius, the same as those that came at 5. Probably some mistake, surely. I mean, the owner's going to fix this. The steward, he doesn't realize we were here as long as we were, and he'll say, no, you're making a big mistake here, but he doesn't. And pretty soon, the ones that came at noon again got 1 denarius. And by that time, the folks that came at 9 and those that came at 7 were screaming in fear and pain. He clearly paid at 7. No. Right? Those that came at 7, they're hot under the collar. They're unhappy. You mean he's going to pay me the same when we did a different amount of work, sure enough, they get to 9, they get to 7, and they all get 1 denarius. And the text, if you look at it, it says, the folks that came at 7 grumbled. I think that's a pale translator's way to put it. I don't think they were terribly excited or happy in any way. They were probably bouncing off the walls. In fact, I suspect what they probably said they couldn't print in the Bible. It probably would not have been appropriate. It'd been blacked out over many years. Like, what was said here is not palatable to read out in church. What's going on here? You're paying us the same as those who didn't even work up a sweat? We've borne the burden of the whole day's work, the scorching hot sun, and you pay us the same as them? And the owner calls him in and he says, now just wait a minute here. Did you not agree with me in the market? To work for the day for 1 denarius. Well, I mean, yeah, I did say that. I did say that. Well, then take your denarius and get out of here. Can I do with my money as I please? Are you angry with me because of my generosity? I choose to give to them what I gave to you. I got to tell you something. I feel like I'm on the side of the workers here. Anybody else on the side of the workers? Let's do hands, participate. This is participatory. Anybody on the side of the workers? I worked a full day's wage. I deserve more than the guys that didn't even sweat get. It's clearly not fair. Did they have a complaint? Did we have a complaint? Good. You can't get away with that kind of business. You can't run your business like that. You can say, I can do whatever I want with my money. But can you? Can you really do whatever you want with your own money? I mean, not if you're like a school board, right? Not if you're a school board. You're going to hire 2 people. A man and a woman. Same skills, same experience, same background. And you're going to pay them different because one's a woman and one's a man? You're not free to do with your money what you want. Not in that situation. Maybe you're thinking, I need to hire someone and a guy of 26 comes in and interviews, another guy who's 64. Are you going to pay the guy who's 64 less because he's closer to retirement and he's a little desperate to get a little more money before he retires? Maybe the 26-year-old, because he's young and stupid, he doesn't realize what he should be being paid. Somebody is going to be down your throat if that's the way you operate your business. We're talking about relative justice. The same pay for the same labor. And in this case, equal pay for the same amount of labor, or you pay more for the same labor. It's not relative, it doesn't make sense. I'm on the side of the workers here. Why would Jesus tell a story that just instantly feels absolutely so unjust? And we get a little hint in this story. What order were they paid in? Who got paid first? The last. The people who worked the least got paid first. That's pretty stupid. That's really dumb. If you really think about it. You pay the 7 o'clock people first. You give them their denarius, they go home, they're happy. You give the next people their denarius, they go home, they're happy. They don't realize everybody else after them got paid the same amount. At least they go home, they don't realize you wrecked them over. You get them out of your hair, and then, what's going to happen tomorrow when this owner goes back down to the town square to hire people? It's going to be a ghost town at 7 in the morning. There's not going to be anybody there. It'd go around at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, though, that big crowd ready to work for him for that day. Unless, and I say this many times, if you've heard me ever talk before, this is something I'll say a whole bunch. Unless Jesus is a really good teacher, which I think he is. I think he's one of the best. There's lots of traps in his parables, make you think you got the answer, and then you don't. There's a little trap right here as well. Maybe Jesus intended for those 7 o'clock people to see what was going to happen. The fact of the matter is, it's hard to understand any biblical scripture unless you know what happens right before it. We've talked about this when we did our book study here. It's hard to know the full picture until you know what's happening right before it. So right before it, flip your Bibles backwards, just go into 19, and there's this story that leads up to it. They're talking about discipleship, and there's this story about this rich young ruler who comes and he goes, "Hey, what do I need to do to inherit the kingdom?" And Jesus tells him, he says, you need to give away all your money. And he goes away and he sulks because he had tons of money. The price was a little too high, and so he sorrowfully goes away. Well, the disciples are standing there watching this exchange happen, and they're trying to start a church, and they can't really believe what they saw, right? They're following this guy thinking it's a church growth seminar. As someone who's now planted a church, I can tell you something. People with money are good friends of yours. You buy them cookies, you take them out to lunch, you figure out whatever you can, because it's hard to make ends meet when you're just getting started. These guys, these disciples, they've given up all the stuff to follow him, and there's this rich guy who's like, I want to be a part of this. And Jesus is like, actually, I think the price is too high, and he sends this guy away, basically. Why would he let this prospect leave that could probably fund their food for the next however long? And Jesus turns to him and to these disciples, and he says this to them. It's easier for a camel to get through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom. Big fat camel, itty bitty tiny little needle. And the disciples look at him and they go, that's impossible. Exactly. Well, with people, it's impossible, but not for God. A deep thought that these disciples miss altogether, right? Because later, Peter comes waltzing up. As I like to say, Peter always has his foot in his mouth. He never thinks before he speaks. He's always got his foot in his mouth. He waltzes up, foot already fully inserted into mouth. And he says to Jesus, but Master, we left everything to follow you. What do we get out of that? Did you hear his question? Leave everything. Can't get into the kingdom if your expectations are to be wealthier and famous. Can't get through. And Peter says, well, we've already given up everything. What do we get for it? Cheated. That's Jesus' answer. You get cheated. Because you'll never compare yourself with someone who's done more than you, as long as you can compare with someone who's done less than you. You get cheated when you say yes to the kingdom. You get kind of wrecked over. Let me tell you just how cheated you're going to feel. Jesus says you're going to get cheated. Let me tell you how cheated you're going to feel. And with that, he tells this story about this parable of these workers in the vineyard. Master, we've left everything for you. What do we get? Cheated. And that attitude is still with us. I think about conversations you'll hear in like post-theology classes, or if you work in church long enough, someone will inevitably ask you this question, whether it's for a parent who's dying or a friend they know who whatever, and they'll have this thing, they'll go, look, okay, I'm nearing, however, it's always old people in my mind for some reason, someone like 40 years old. And they'll say something like, this it's just not fair. It's not fair. I have lived my whole life a responsible and committed Christian. I tithe my money. I do activities in the church. I volunteer for the kids ministry. I change diapers in the nursery. Nobody changes diapers in the nursery, but I change diapers in the nursery. And I take the pastor out to lunch. And I've done all these good things. And what you're telling me is that someone can live however they want. They can just do whatever they want their whole life. If it feels good, do it. And then right on their deathbed, they can have a true profession of faith, and they get exactly what I get. That is crap. That is crap. They get the rewards of heaven despite how they lived. And what do I get for all my sacrifice? Cheated. You get cheated. It's not fair. If you turn the kingdom promise into this contract instead of something else, that's when you start to feel cheated. And we're captured by contracts. We love it. We get contracts everywhere. There's a contract for us to rent this place. I got contracts with insurance companies. I got a contract with a builder for my house. I got a contract with a realtor to try to sell my house. I've signed my name so many times in the last 7 months, my hand hurts still. My hand still hurts. You're in a little church gathering in a Sunday, and you're sitting in a little circle. Put yourself in this. You're introducing yourselves in a small group. Put it all right here. With me. Close your eyes if you have to picture it. Don't fall asleep, though. I'll wake you up. And you go around the room to introduce yourselves. And it starts, and the guy right to your left, he says, well, I used to work road construction. I used to be a banker. We'll make him a banker. I think banker is a little more. I used to be a banker. Do you hear what he's saying? Do you hear it already? I used to be this. My contract, it's expired. I no longer identify as that anymore. I don't bring the bacon home anymore like that. I used to do that. And you go around the circle a little more, and then it's the mom. She's sitting there, and she looks up. She goes, "I'm just a housewife." Did you hear it again? If you don't get paid the dollars for the work, it must be worthless. You try to translate that attitude to the kingdom, this covenant, into a contract. You put it on this idea of merit and not relationship, and it gets twisted and messed up. You get cheated suddenly. So I want to ask a question. You can open your eyes. Don't fall asleep. And this is just like a question, and it'll resonate with some of you. Some of you, you'll be able to get where I'm getting at here. Imagine you're the parent of 3 kids. Name them in your head. Give them names. One is 15, one is 10, and one is 5. Give them names in your head. Are you ready? Great. Put them all up there. Here's my question to you. Do you love the 15-year-old 3 times as much as the 5-year-old? Do you love your 15-year-old 3 times as much as your 5-year-old? Or do you love your 5-year-old 3 times as much as your 15-year-old because they have a third amount of grief they've given you in their life? Let's go the other way, maybe. Right? Maybe they've been 3 times as much help because they're 15 years older. So they've really helped. Maybe they do. Or, what would you say to me? Is it crazy? Is it crazy to say, I love them 3 times as much because they're 3 times as old? They put in 3 times the amount of work. Is that crazy? Because it's not a business deal, is it? What is it? It's family. It's family. Exactly. It's family. Do you know what the owner of the vineyard is doing right now? Do you know what he's doing? He's driving around that market one more time, just to see if there's anybody left who hasn't yet been invited to work in the vineyard. And in fact, why does the owner go every single time? Because he's never stops, never ceases traveling the market to see if there's anybody left to invite into his family. It doesn't matter if you get invited at 7 o'clock, you respond at noon, whether it's morning, it's noon, or night, there isn't a difference. Because to be invited into the vineyard is to be invited into the family. And who could ask for anything else? This parable isn't about the laborers of the vineyard. Even though, I'm sure if you looked on the top, it would say, Matthew 20, the laborers in the vineyard. Someone added that because it was pretty. It's not. It's like the parable of the prodigal son. I think that's a horrible title. It's the parable of the extravagantly loving father. How about here, instead of the parable of the laborers in the vineyard, it's not about the vineyard, is it? It's not really about it. It's not really about the laborers either, right? There's no story about how they worked so hard and look at all the bushels you have gathered. There's no talk about how much they worked or whether they worked hard or if it was hot or whether one was a good laborer and one wasn't, or man, those guys that came later did a really good job playing catch up. We hear complaints about those that toil all day long, but the story is not about them either. This parable is about the absolute generosity of this landowner. The ultimate landowner. That God will use what has always belonged to the Creator for the good of all, even if humans fail to view the world through the eyes He sees it with. In Jesus' earlier words, God's perfection is exemplified in God's reign on the just and unjust. In Matthew, he talks about God's perfection is exemplified by that he reigns over both the just and the unjust. The landowner's question is the punchline for the story. I love this. You might have to say it after I say it. Are you envious because I'm generous? Give it. Are you envious because I'm generous? With some gusto. It's not 10:40 in the morning. Are you envious because I'm generous? No matter how long you feel like you've followed God, how much you've given up, how much you've said yes, whether it was very recent or your whole life or you've just began, the kingdom of God is for everyone equally. The length of your tenure The length of how long you've served, how much you've given up, doesn't determine the reward. And here's the trick. Here's the hard thing. And I'm going to say it, and then I'll try to explain it. It was with this little thing at the very top. Unless we desire grace for everyone instead of justice for everyone, we don't live in the fullness of the kingdom. So unless our heart's desire is those that come in at 5 o'clock earn the same grace we did, then we want justice, not grace. For grace we have been given, and grace we will show to others. Unless we desire it for all, we do not live in the fullness of the kingdom.